Welcome to the Nitro College Football Show, college football from a Georgia perspective. I'm Burl.
And I'm Streit.
And today we are talking college football playoff semifinals. A couple of prominent coaches could be headed to the NFL, and some more portal news that everybody loves. So let's dive right in. College football playoff semifinals. What do you think of the games just overall?
Well, I would say that the one thing, at least this year, we did get good semifinal games. They both were competitive. They both were not blowouts. Both teams played well, I think, to a certain degree. You know, Penn State, Notre Dame, there was a little bit more struggle there, but both teams executed well. And it was just two good, good even matches between the teams that were playing. But yeah, I mean, I thought they were good games. They were enjoyable, fun to watch, and it looks like we're going to get, an exciting national championship game. We'll talk more about that, but it was good. They were good games.
Yeah, very entertaining games. Lots of drama in those. Was just really happy that that both of them were good games, because we thought one was going to be not so much. But yeah, I was engaged in it, and it was good. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. So let's talk some Orange Bowl. So Notre Dame pulls it out against Penn State, 27-24, and somehow Notre Dame wins despite losing the turnover battle and not having much of a running game.
Yeah, Penn State absolutely shut Notre Dame's vaunted three-headed rushing attack down. And on the flip side, Penn State was able to run the ball fairly well. But Notre Dame, because they were not running the ball, had to get their passing game going. And at the end of the game, that kind of ended up being the difference, because Penn State couldn't muster hardly anything. Drew Aller only had 135 yards in the game. And ultimately, it was late in the fourth quarter. The game was tied. Penn State had a ball, chance to, run down, try to kick a field goal to win the game. And Drew Aller threw a horrible, horrible interception that set Notre Dame up. Notre Dame converted a couple of big plays, and Mitch Jeter kicked the game-winning field goal. Really solidified Notre Dame's kicking game, getting him back healthy, because it was noted more than one.
Any relation?
To who?
To Derek Jeter?
No, he was pretty clutch. But yeah, I mean, Notre Dame noted early in the playoffs that they were the worst field goal kicking team in the country by percentage, and that was because Jeter was hurt earlier in the year. He's finally healthy, and he was great for them in the playoff. He's been, lights out. So they got the win.
They did. Penn State, like you said, was able to run the ball. Both backs had over 80 yards, which was pretty impressive. But ultimately, the game came down to quarterback play. Even though Tyler Warren got his 6 receptions for 75 yards, he also had 2 rushes for 21. One of them was a ridiculous run where he should have been caught dead in the backfield for like a 10, 20 yards loss. And
yeah. The funniest thing about that was he lined up a quarterback on that play, and he kind of moved to his left, and then he looked like he was about to throw it. And I was like, oh man, he's left-handed. Like, that was you're not used to seeing a big guy go back down to throw, and then he was left-handed, and that was like even crazier. But he actually made a really good play to turn that into a long run. He broke like 2 tackles and juked a guy. But yeah, it was just a funny one, because I was like, oh man.
Yeah,
big lefty.
That was one of the most impressive plays of the weekend for sure.
Yeah.
But another game where you look at the stat sheet and think, how did Notre Dame win this thing?
Well, I think, we talked about this the last couple of weeks, that Penn State in both of these games kind of did the same thing. They got out to leads, and then they just kind of mulled around and let the other team kind of get back into it. And the games ended up being, a little bit closer than they should have. And that's exactly what happened in this game. You watched the beginning of this game. Penn State got out to a 10-0 lead, and you looked like they were going to dominate the game. They were moving the line of scrimmage. Notre Dame could do nothing. It was 10-0 really fast, but then they kind of just shut down, and they let Notre Dame get back into it. Right before the half, they actually knocked Riley Leonard out of the game, and Notre Dame's backup quarterback had to come in the game. And that actually, surprise, surprise, a backup coming in the game kind of started to spark the offense, but it did. Steve Angeli came in, went 6 for 7 on the drive, got 44 yards, and Notre Dame was able to get a field goal right before half. And that was huge because up until that point, they had no points on the board and absolutely no offense. So I think that was really key to get them going. Then they came back out after halftime and opened it up with a strong 75-yard touchdown drive that ended up with Riley Leonard, who was back in the game at that point, getting a touchdown. And the game was suddenly tied. And once again, you look up and you're like, man, Penn State was dominating this game, and all of a sudden the game is tied.
Yep, exactly like we called it. Penn State, key to the game for them was to just do what is working. And they got a little cute there for a little bit, trying to do some trick plays, and they put a lot on Drew Aller. And normally, I think he has like the best completion percentage in the Big Ten. Super reliable, super accurate, doesn't really turn the ball over. But man, he had a game to forget this past weekend.
Yeah, and that was including one that he got away with. Riley Leonard threw a pretty bad interception, which set up Penn State really nicely. And Penn State threw a pass that was toward the end zone, and it was way behind the receiver. There was multiple Notre Dame defenders in there. And the one Notre Dame guy kind of touched arms with the receiver while the other guy picked it off, and they ended up calling it back for pass interference. It was a really bad pass interference call that ended up kind of saving their butts there. And Penn State ended up scoring a touchdown on another touchdown run by Nick Singleton. So that was actually Penn State's first lead since early in the game. That put them up 24-17 at that point.
Yeah, and Notre Dame had a couple of interceptions called back for pass interference, and I thought both of them were pretty bad.
Yeah,
to be honest, especially that one. I was going to ask you, is that a bad call or nah? But I think we agree that's a bad call.
It was a pretty bad call. I mean, I think somebody on the broadcast or something said by the definition of the rule, it was a pass interference, but when you underthrow the ball that bad on your receiver, like into double, triple coverage, whatever it was, like you kind of deserve the interception at that point. But they got away with it.
Right?
And like I said, they took the lead. Yeah, they did. And Notre Dame at that point was kind of back up against the wall, but they were able to dig themselves out real quick. They had an 81-yard touchdown drive that was highlighted by a 54-yard touchdown pass to Jaden Greathouse. And all of a sudden we had a tie game here late in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, it got real exciting there, and man, Riley Leonard freaking battled this whole game.
Yeah, he got knocked out there. He got beat up. Penn State certainly had a plan to put pressure on Riley Leonard. Not only did they obviously shut down Notre Dame's rushing attack, but they had 5 sacks in the game and 8 tackles for loss. Riley Leonard threw 2 interceptions. And like I said, Penn State was dominant in terms of the running game. They had 204 yards rushing. Notre Dame had 116, a team that had prided itself all season on running the ball, with its running backs and its quarterback.
Yeah, fun game all around. Anything else to say about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think one other telling stat, if you're looking at stats that kind of tell the story of this game, Penn State on third down was only 3 of 11 and 2 of 2 on fourth down. Notre Dame was 11 of 17 on third down. So when Notre Dame was able to get in those situations, they kept drives going. And that, as a defense, it's demoralizing. You get somebody into third down and then you can't get off the field. Notre Dame never even had to go for a fourth down in the game. And Penn State did. So frustrating again, another, like we said, microcosm of Penn State, what they've been here in the playoff. You get a lead, you're looking good, you kind of let off, you let the other guy hang around, and your quarterback makes a mistake in the end that sets up the other team. Field goal like that. Notre Dame back in the national championship game for the first time since 2012 season when they got crushed by Alabama.
Exactly. And another example of James Franklin losing a big game.
Yep. On the flip side, for Marcus Freeman, this is only his 3rd year as head coach at Notre Dame. And he's done a pretty good job of picking up, what Brian Kelly described as a place that you couldn't win a championship and taking them back to a national championship game. Now, that quote was a little misleading because obviously, like I said, Notre Dame has obviously the history of playing for championships, and they had been to one in 2012. But it is good to see them kind of build their program back the right way. They look a little bit tougher, a little bit stronger, than they used to be. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I think I saw it on Feinbaum or something like that. It said that Notre Dame used to be the most hated team in America, and Marcus Freeman has totally changed that narrative.
Yeah, I mean, he's a likable coach. Like
Absolutely,
he doesn't talk bad about other teams. He's respectful. He seems to coach the right way. And his players are very, very loyal. When he took that job, when Kelly left, he stepped right in and took that team, coached them in the bowl game that year, and let's build this team. I'm here for this team, and he's got something cooking there. We'll see what happens.
Indeed. So Notre Dame, they punched their ticket to Atlanta in a really entertaining game. Another entertaining game that I was hoping would be close was Ohio State versus Texas. But before we talk about that game, we want to thank you so much for spending your time with us. Please hit that like button, drop some comments. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and tell your friends. It really helps us grow.
Yeah, and if you're listening to us in the audio format, please be sure to also like the episode and leave us a comment, write us a review. Any engagement helps, and we really appreciate it. And we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely. So I got lots of thoughts on this game.
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State wins comfortably, but was it really comfortable? Not so much. Ohio State wins the game 28-14, but this game was 1 yard away from being a 21-21 game with, just under a minute left to go.
We thought we were going to see Texas play their third overtime game in the last four, which would have been wild.
Yeah, that's crazy. And, sometimes we thought Georgia might have that too when after the Georgia Tech game and the Texas game, and then it was looking like potentially the Notre Dame game could go, into the fourth quarter. But Texas was, unlike their other two games, they weren't able to get it done here. They had every chance to. They drove down the field. They were at the 1 yard line. Ohio State gifted them some bad pass interference calls that gave Texas a shot. First down, they ran the ball, didn't really pick up anything. And then on second down, Steve Sarkisian made one of the worst play calls I've seen in a pressure situation in a long, long time. I understand what he was trying to do, calling the toss to get the ball outside, because Ohio State's defense, particularly in the middle, is the toughest in the country. But why, when you have looking at 4 shots from the 1 yard line, are you running your running back out horizontal and then almost backward? The play ended up losing 7 yards, and you went from first and goal at the 1 to third and goal at the 8. And 2 plays later, it didn't matter.
Yeah, that was a terrible call, especially the type of toss play that they did. If they do like a full student body left,
right,
then maybe, and that would have been okay, but they didn't have enough people out there to block. And I think it was Ransom who came in and made the play, just untouched, darted right in there and got him in the backfield. And that, the toss sweep heard around the world. And that play forced Texas into an obvious passing situation, which then led to the play of the game.
Right. Well, in that play, it was kind of the MO for the whole game for Texas. Quinn Ewers, one of the criticisms of Quinn Ewers kind of here lately and kind of all season is that he held the ball too long, that he took too long to make his decisions. And that's what happened here. Much like in the Georgia game, when Notre Dame was able to hit Stockton from behind and make him fumble, Ohio State was able to do the same thing. Jack Sawyer came in off the blitz. Ewers held the ball too long, got back, started to throw. Sawyer knocked it away, picked it up, and ran it back all the way past the entire Ohio State sideline, which was on the white line and did not get called for interference. So,
and it was the same crew as the Georgia Notre Dame game.
Right. But ran it back all the way. I'm glad they didn't, because I'd been really ridiculous if they would have called it back.
No, I would have loved it.
It wouldn't have mattered because Ohio State would just take a knees and into the game anyway. But
That would have been amazing.
but the pictures and the memes that have come out since then are pretty funny, because
I
man, you
know.
got to feel bad for the Georgia kid after seeing that.
Seriously, all because one ref got up in his feels.
Right. So like you said, at the end of the day, it ended up to being 28-14, 14-point win for Ohio State. Ohio State covers the spread once again. It was a lot closer than that. But if you look back at the very beginning of this game, it didn't look like it was going to be close at all. Texas had the ball first, and they had a nice little drive going down the field. They kind of stalled out, and they went for it on a fourth down. They didn't get it. And Ohio State got the ball and immediately went right down the field and scored very, very quickly. One thing in this game was that Texas was committed to stopping Jeremiah Smith. Jeremiah Smith only had one catch for 4 yards in this game. But
Which was shocking.
Right.
Absolutely shocking.
But it also shows the depth of Ohio State's wide receivers, because Emeka Egbuka had it, and Carnell Tate both had phenomenal games for Ohio State. And both of those guys would be number one receivers at almost every single program in the country.
And then, not to mention, you got two of the best backs in the country. You know, one of the touchdowns was Travion Henderson, 75 yards to the house. Changed the game.
Right. Yeah, so, I mean, after that first drive, which was a Judkins touchdown, after that first drive, both teams kind of went into shutdown mode. The next 9 drives in the first half, after the long Texas drive that ended on a fourth down and the Ohio State touchdown drive, the next 9 drives were punts.
Yeah, that's a wild stat.
Yeah, it's crazy. And yes, these are two of the best defenses in the country, but they're also two teams that have really good offenses. And the fact that 9 straight drives ended in punts, like I saw that after the game and I was like, that's amazing. And the other thing about that is a lot of those drives stalled out because both teams were making a lot of stupid penalties in this game. The penalties in this game were nuts. And we'll talk about one later in the game that on the Texas's final drive that was absolutely infuriating, but we'll get to there.
Yeah. It was a really hard-hitting affair like this, and this game delivered. It was an amazing game from start to finish. Just a battle. There were dudes all over the field on both sides of the ball. You know, you had the battle of the number 1 and number 3 defense in the country. And I got to admit, you know, Texas defense, they're elite, but I did not expect this type of performance out of them. The way Ohio State's been playing, you know, last week I called them a juggernaut, which, I mean, they pretty much are on offense. But to this, you know, Texas, they played their butts off and they kept Ohio State to, you know, pretty manageable, winnable number, you know, and if it's not the scoop and score, then it's going into overtime. Yeah.
I mean, one thing that you can look for on the opposite side in this game was that Texas had really, most of the season, they were a run-driven team. You know, Ewers kind of gets the press, but they had found success relying, especially in the second half of the year, on their defense and run game until they got to the end of the season. Georgia solved their rush game, held them under 100 yards. Last week, when they played Arizona State, well, yeah, I mean, when they played Arizona State, they were held to under 100 yards. And then this week, once again, they were held to under 100 yards this week, only getting 58 yards on the ground. So it made a lot of pressure. The one thing that Texas didn't really want to do was put this game all on Quinn Ewers to win it for him. But the failure to get the running game going absolutely kind of did that. Ohio State brought heavy pressure throughout the game. They had 4 sacks. Obviously, none was bigger than the last sack of the game. But Quinn Ewers kind of held the ball a little too long, and it's kind of been a problem for him. And it just resulted in some game changers in terms of getting sacks and getting pressures.
Yeah, the Texas offense is kind of an enigma because you think that they have all these amazing playmakers. You know, you got Isaiah Bond and Golden and their tight end who's awesome too, and you know the two backs, but they didn't really have that much of an impact. We saw Golden, you know, leave the game, go in the back, and Isaiah Bonds had a just up and down season all year. And like you said, you know, Texas had to rely on the run game this year. I think a lot of that was when Ewers went down with the injury for a while, and Arch was in there, and he did fine, but they weren't playing anybody. Right. But you know, Ewers had that giant ankle brace thing on, so I'm sure that had something to do with part of his play. Yeah. But the playmakers on offense for Texas don't stack up to the playmakers on offense for Ohio State.
Right. It took Texas, despite having all these receivers, it took a couple of passes to the running backs to kind of get their offense finally going. They ran a nice wheel route pass to halfback Jaden Blue that got their first touchdown of the game, and the game was tied. And this was right before half. There was like 20 seconds left. They kicked off to Ohio State. Ohio State got the touchback. But then, and probably other than the strip sack, it's probably the second most important play of the entire game happened. They dropped back to pass. They had good rush from the Texas defense, slipped a little screen pass to Travian Henderson, and it looked like almost like a punt return. Like the whole line was out there just blocking guys, and Henderson just burst right through. Texas was kind of back set deep to prevent from anything long. So like I said, it kind of looked like a punt return. Guys coming up and just people blocking him off, and he took it all the way 75 yards to the house, and just like that, Ohio State was back up 7 going into halftime. And you thought, uh-oh, here we go. Texas is in trouble now. Ohio State's going to put them away. And Ohio State came out, start the second half, and what happens? Will Howard turned back into old Will Howard and threw a horrible pick to open up the second half, which, you know, kind of killed that momentum that they'd gotten right there at the end of the first half. Now, Texas wasn't able to do anything on that drive, kind of stalled out a little bit again. Texas was still down 7 points, and it took another wheel route to Blue to finally get them to tie up the score.
So he's got my new favorite name in college football, Blue.
Jaden
You're my boy, Blue.
Yeah. So after they had finally tied it up on the second wheel route to Jaden Blue, Ohio State came out. They got the ball back after a punt, and they went on a 12-play, 88-yard touchdown drive that included a fourth down conversion at the Texas 34 on a run by Will Howard. Ultimately, Judkins punches that in from 1. Ohio State is up 7 with just a few minutes left to go.
Yeah, that run by Will Howard was so clutch.
Yeah.
I mean, that really just changed the momentum for Ohio State there.
Right. I mean, especially at the 34, you know, it's a long field goal, and if you punt it deep, you know, you're really handing the ball to Texas, you know, and Ryan Day has had his problems with late field goals, obviously, in semifinals. Yeah. And so it was a clutch play. Obviously, so they were up 7. Texas gets the ball back, and they go on a long drive, which one of the main plays, and this is what I was mentioning earlier, Texas completed a long pass to Gunnar Helm, and Gunnar Helm kind of burned some guys, went down the field. And as he was going to be tackled, he kind of shoved Caleb Downs out of the way to the ground as he went out of bounds, and kind of gave him a little bit of the talking business. And they threw a 15-yard penalty for unsportsmanlike conduct. One of the weakest unsportsmanlike conduct. Defensive backs, they break up a pass. Even if they're called for pass interference, they're doing the sword, they're doing this number. You got a big tight end who on a long play throws down one of the best players in America trying to tackle him, and just says a little something to him, and he points at him, and
you didn't even say anything. You just pointed.
Yeah. I mean, it was ridiculous. That's where we are in officiating in college football.
That officiating crew should not be part of any other major games moving forward because they've had an impact on two.
Yeah, they really have. I mean, Texas recovered, obviously, from that play. They obviously got down because just coming right out of that, 2 more penalties were called on Ohio State, both for pass interference. Ultimately, that led to the attempt for the 1 yard line, and we all know what happened from there.
Makeup calls.
Yeah, 2 of them in a row. But yeah, end of the game, Ohio State wins by 14. They're headed back to the national championship game for the first time since 2020, and or the 2020 national championship game. It happened in 2021, but the 2020 national championship game. I think this was certainly a good game by both defenses. They certainly held the other team with star players in check for most of this game. And realistically, the defensive performance was actually more impressive on the Texas side even than on the Ohio State side, really, because if you take out the strip fumble and you take out the 175-yard screenplay, you held Ohio State that had scored 40 points in its first 2 playoff games against 2 of the better defenses in the country to 14 points. I mean, you are doing something right. But they just didn't have enough to get past the game. Both quarterbacks had good games, I think. But once again, Texas didn't use the Arch Manning package other than 1 4th down play that I can think of.
Which they should have done instead of doing that stupid toss sweep.
Right. Right. I mean,
it's worked for them all the time, basically.
Right. It's worked they used it in the game, earlier in the game on a 4th down. So I don't understand it. Sarkisian is a great offensive coordinator, but sometimes his calls as a head coach are a little bit head scratching.
Yeah.
So
I agree. It was an awesome game, and yeah, Texas defense. I mean, holding Ohio State to 21 offensive points, that's impressive. Because, like you said, they did score 40 at least in the last 2 games, and have just been dump trucking teams. But ultimately, this was a defensive battle, and it was decided by defense. Ohio State just had one more dude than Texas.
They just
and that
had
dude's
one
name is Jack Sawyer.
20 years old roommate, and of course, they said they said they were joking each other after the game. He couldn't even look at him, and just it's an interesting story in this day and age of transfers that you have a guy who started at one school and then had a chance to come back and beat him, but he couldn't get it done. Maybe a little bit of revenge for the Ohio State boys.
Yeah. Jack Sawyer's press conference at the end was pretty funny when he was talking about when he was running down there. He said, "Oh, I've got some room. Oh, I'm not going to fall like Will. Don't fall like Will."
Oh man,
man, Will Howard, he had a touchdown. Just nobody in front of him, and I think the announcer said the 20-yard line tackled him. Or no, that might have been the McAfee podcast or the McAfee cast.
Remind you of the Georgia Ohio State game a couple years ago. Kenny McIntosh in the clear. Chris Bauer. Kenny McIntosh scores a touchdown. No, he's no. Oh man.
Yeah, which if he scores that touchdown, then we're not talking about a field goal at the end of that game. Anyway, I digress.
Yep. But yeah, so national championship game is set. We've got number 8 Ohio State taking on number 7 Notre Dame. It's funny in this whole expanded playoff. You had the favorites winning in almost every game, and I think actually maybe in every game. Notre Dame, I think, ultimately closed as a favorite over Georgia. You had the semifinals made up of the 4 teams that were the teams that got to host the playoffs. None of the top 4 that were conference championships. Nobody who made it to even the semifinals were conference champions. So I think there's a lot of things to look at in terms of how this playoff is played out. Obviously, we'll see what happens in the championship game, but it's going to be a large spread. I think it opened around 8 or something. I think it's already gone up to like 9.5.
Another thing that's interesting is in the old systems that we've seen, you would have had Georgia versus Oregon,
Right.
But I think the CFP overlords got exactly who they wanted in the Natty.
Right.
You have the two biggest brands in college football.
Right. I mean, the only thing they could have hoped for better was maybe having Alabama in there, but
I don't think
Texas.
so.
I mean, yeah.
Maybe
I mean,
Texas. Yeah.
it's arguably, yeah. I think maybe Texas, but yeah, they got what they wanted. Though the one thing I did see is that television ratings were down for these semifinal games, even down from the quarterfinal games. And
there's I think it's because this one team that's from around here wasn't in it, because they've had the highest ratings of all the games this year.
I think that's part of it. But somebody said to me the other day, these games were coming on the other night, and I just wasn't as excited as I have been in years past for these semifinal games. And obviously it's more exciting when Georgia's in it, but even before, I've always been really psyched up for these playoff games to see these matchups. And I think maybe I was just a little bit fatigued after the first couple rounds. Like, I was really geeked up for the first round and even for the quarterfinals, even the games Georgia wasn't in, but I just kind of felt like these games are going to happen. And I don't know, maybe, the national ratings kind of reflect that maybe more football is not necessarily better for the television audience.
Between the ratings and probably ticket sales at these bowl games, I mean, they've got to change it to where you're not traveling to a neutral site every week. Yeah. That's absolutely ridiculous. You don't do that in the NFL. You have home teams. The higher ranked team gets to be at home. Do that. You will have awesome atmospheres, packed stadiums, and a lot more excitement, because that first round was really exciting. Yeah. Playoff games on campus, even though all the games were stinkers because they're all blowouts, that going into it, you're like, oh, I'm excited to see this. This is different. Yeah. And yeah, it was kind of downhill from there.
They've got a lot of work to do, and we'll get to that. We will have some shows this offseason about our ideas to fix the college football playoff for sure.
Indeed. So the other thing is, speaking of, being like the two biggest brands in college football, cheapest ticket for this game, $1,500. Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot. Yep. It's going to be an expensive one. Last time they were here, the championship was here in Atlanta. It was a pretty hefty ticket there, but it's kind of skewed a little bit by having a local team playing in that game.
True. But should be great TV. And speaking of TV, let's talk some prime time.
Yep. So Deion Sanders has reportedly shown interest in the Las Vegas Raiders' vacant head coaching job. Some people were saying, oh, look, Deion could go to LA and then he can, draft his son to play quarterback and build around it. Which is interesting because Deion Sanders, 2 years at the FBS level, 4-8 his first year, improved the record, this year to 9-4. But is Deion Sanders really the type of guy to lead an NFL team? Is he worthy of an NFL job?
He's got great PR. I mean, we talked about this before. Colorado, they didn't beat anybody this year. Right. And in the one game that they got to play someone halfway decent in BYU, they got the brakes beaten off of them. Right. So I don't know how real it is for, Deion to be rumored for a head coaching job in the NFL just yet, because I don't really think he's proven that he can do it at the college level yet.
Right. I mean, he had lots of players that he brought with him to Colorado, and he brought the Heisman Trophy winner, and he brought his son that he could feature. I think for him to be taken serious as an NFL head coaching job, he's going to have to continue to prove it. Not saying he can't, but it's hard to think that a guy that came into Colorado and set all the players down that at a bad program and said, basically, you can leave and don't come back, I'm replacing you. You can't have that attitude with an NFL team. You've got guys on contract. You can't come in and cut everybody and handpick what you want. So I just don't know if his philosophy, at least as it exists right now, would work at the NFL level. Maybe he can one day. I just feel like he's young in his career.
Yeah.
Reports also came out today that the Las Vegas Raiders have no interest in actually hiring Deion, and that maybe this was an idea floated by Deion Sanders to leverage more money out of Colorado. So we'll see what happens.
Like I said, he's got great PR.
Yeah, that's for sure. Other than Deion, another prominent coach that is getting NFL interest, and this time it's real, is Notre Dame's Marcus Freeman. It's said that the Chicago Bears want to interview him for their vacant head coaching job. The plan is to have the interview after the national title game. Now, the Bears have been interviewing a lot of different people, including some very prominent names in the college football realm. Former Georgia running back and Bears interim head coach Thomas Brown, Ravens offensive coordinator and former Georgia OC Todd Monken, Pete Carroll, and Iowa State head coach Matt Campbell have all been interviewed already. But like I said, it sounds like they're waiting to make a decision until after the national title game and they get a chance to interview Marcus Freeman. So it'd be interesting. Marcus Freeman is very young. He's only 37. He's only been a head coach at Notre Dame for 2 years. So it would be quite a step up for a young coach moving up if he took it or if he got offered the job.
It really would be. And it's a interesting thing to think about with, like, would he actually take that job? Let's say they win somehow, win the national championship, and he has brought Notre Dame back. I mean, I think you can officially say you're back once you win a national championship. Total
Right.
Disrespect to Texas, I mean it. But
or Tennessee, who's been a year away from being back for
25
years.
Absolutely. It's something about being UT, maybe.
Yeah.
It's the UT thing. But yeah, like that'd be a tough decision, because Notre Dame is one of the most prestigious from a historical perspective, prestigious jobs in all of college football. But you know what? Chicago Bears, that's a big job too. I mean, that's another team steeped in tradition.
Right. Well, I mean, but even that, for lots of coaches, the NFL is the ultimate goal, right? Especially nowadays, lots of coaches have talked about how it's actually become a little bit easier to be an NFL head coach than a college head coach. Just changing times. So we'll see what happens if he ultimately does complete that interview and if he gets an offer.
Yeah. So yeah, speaking of other weird things in the world we live in, is I think the NFL is going to need to up their pay scale to get players to even go into the draft, because we've got some more portal madness. It seems to be the thing that everybody likes the most on our channel. So we're going to give it to you. So this past week, Carson Beck commits to Miami, and honestly, seeing that reel of him and his internet girlfriend just makes my skin crawl. So freaking cringy.
Yeah, it was horrible. Like, we were right. He took the money and went to Miami, and it was all about the money. It had nothing to do with improving your draft stock. It had nothing to do with, being able to show off. It had all to do with money.
Or win a title.
No, it had nothing to do with any of that. He strictly got a huge offer to go down there. Rumors are that he's getting somewhere in the range of $4 million just for playing, and up to $10 million in NIL deals. That's
Wild.
insane. Like, yeah, if he went to the NFL, he probably wouldn't maybe been a second-round draft pick. And just for perspective, Will Levis, the starting quarterback for the Tennessee Titans this year, who was a second-round pick, made $915,000 this year.
Yeah, I mean, business-wise, a brilliant move. Good for him. I don't know how he's so marketable. I don't get it. I've never gotten it, even when he was at Georgia. He's Carson Beck. So I'll leave it at that.
Good luck to him.
Yeah, good. In all seriousness, well, before we get to all seriousness, when it comes to this whole situation, I'll say thank you to Carson Beck for all he did at Georgia. He was a hell of a player here. He had a tough break there at the end, but now from here on out, I hope he sucks.
Yeah. Good luck to you. I mean, I don't hope he sucks. I hope he goes and has fine, just as long as it doesn't end up with him playing us or beating us. But good luck to you. Good luck with your money. Get paid. And more power to you. I just hate the precedent itself. Like you're just going to have more guys who are, potentially headed to the NFL demanding more and more money. And it's just going to continue to drive what's already becoming an out of control free agent market in college football over the edge. That something's going to have to happen.
I think that's part of what's driving inflation right now. But in all seriousness, I wish him the best at Miami, and I really hope that Miami ends up losing to Syracuse at home next year.
Yeah, yep. So another interesting transfer portal development that happened this week. I don't know if you have heard the curious case of Deshaun Purdy. So Deshaun Purdy was a freshman quarterback at Charlotte this year. And it is known kind of as a raw prospect. I think he threw for about 1,800 yards, 50% completion percentage, 10 touchdowns. So not crazy numbers. Decided to go in the transfer portal and had some really good interest. Two of the schools that were interested in him were Georgia and Florida. Back on December 22nd, he committed to Florida, headed down there. Then the news comes out today that he is asked to be released from his commitment to Florida. And the reason is that apparently he thought he was going to go to Florida and be the starting quarterback. Now, I don't know who his advisor is or if he just doesn't have a television, but why anyone associated with college football would thought that this guy who had an okay freshman season at Charlotte was going to go down there and beat DJ Lagway out, who has been heralded as the next great quarterback in all of college football. I don't know what to tell you.
It's insane. It's insane. I don't get it. I mean, maybe he's one of those guys that just doesn't watch football. Maybe it's like like Carson Beck said, he didn't like to watch football because it stressed him out.
Yeah, but he has advisors who do, and when he committed there, all his stuff was like, I'm ready to go be committed and to be developed and all this stuff.
Nah,
well, it makes no sense. So I guess he's going to be back in the transfer portal. I mean, Georgia wanted to bring him in, but I don't think that Georgia is not known to ever offer anybody a starting job as a transfer quarterback. So,
oh no, Kirby likes to keep 4 quarterbacks on the roster. That's what he said. So like he would fill that Jaden Rashada role,
right? Well,
ironically,
Georgia's going to have 4 scholarship quarterbacks on the team next year anyway, but because we got 2 freshmen coming in, but just another weird situation. So in other transfer portal news, there were a couple of higher profile commits this week. One was Elijah Pritchett, the tackle from Alabama, who I hoped Georgia would go after, but I guess they weren't ever really in it. But he committed to Nebraska, so Nebraska again is spending big in the transfer portal, kind of quietly. They went and got Dane Key. Now they go get Elijah Pritchett, so they're really trying to build around Dylan Raiola there. Be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, that was a big pickup for Nebraska in all reality there. I mean, they had to spend big for that. And I was hoping he was going to there would be some interest from Georgia there because Georgia's got to replace the entire offensive line, basically.
Yeah. So the other interesting commit this week was Alex Orji, the quarterback from Michigan, who has committed to UNLV to play for Dan Mullen. Now you might say, oh, well, whatever, he's going to UNLV, but Dan Mullen with a mobile quarterback has had success in the past. I mean, look what he did, down there at Mississippi State developing Dak Prescott. So UNLV was one of those teams that in the group before was a favorite until their quarterback this year opted out. So Dan Mullen sees the opportunity, brings in a couple of good transfers. Maybe they build that program into what could be one of the better in the group of 5 going forward. So it's an interesting one just because he kind of underwhelmed. He was kind of seen as the potential starter at Michigan this year, just didn't work out. He wasn't really developed as a passer, more of a runner, but maybe that fits in a Dan Mullen offense.
Possibly. I mean, orgy to Vegas, so many jokes there.
Very, very true. But the last thing about the transfer portal is that while the transfer window is closed for most teams, there are still a few teams who have that window open. All the teams that are still playing, when their season's in, they get 5 days. Players get 5 days to go in the portal. So, obviously the two teams that just lost, their window is now open for a couple more days. And then after the national title game, you'll see the windows open up for Ohio State and Notre Dame. The question is, from these really 4 big programs that are really high profile, you've seen other high profile programs lose a lot of players in this portal cycle. Are we going to see the same from those schools? And who could it be? Of course, the real interesting one that people are chomping at the bit that I think has 0% chance of happening is Arch Manning hopping in the portal if Quinn Ewers decided to go back to Texas. Now, Quinn Ewers after the game said, no, I'm going to the NFL draft. But with what just happened with Carson Beck, I wouldn't be too sure if there's not another team that ponies up some money to get Quinn Ewers to stay in college, because lots of people like Carson Beck. Lots of people have said that Quinn Ewers' draft status has really fallen, and he might not be any higher than a second-round pick at this point.
No, and Carson's numbers are better than yours this year.
Right.
So, I mean, somebody will pony up. It'll happen.
For $10 million? For $10 million, for sure.
I mean, hell, even if he got $2 million, that's still better than being a second-round pick.
Right. And like I mentioned, there was lots of critiques and complaints about what Quinn Ewers does as a quarterback in that game the other night. That obviously more than just Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit, if they're seeing it, obviously NFL scouts are seeing it too. So
Quinn Ewers to Oregon? No, they got somebody, right?
Do they? I don't know. I know they had that freshman who got on campus for like a week and left.
Yeah, he left because I think there's another guy that's like in line there. But I was just thinking, they're losing their quarterback or whatever.
Yeah.
Wonder who else would be good. Yeah, we can talk like good landing spots later.
Yeah. So that's kind of it for this week. Obviously, we will be back later in the week for our college football national championship preview. Please, if you haven't, once again, like this video, leave us a comment. That would be great. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear who you think's going to win the national championship game. And don't forget to subscribe. But until we talk to you next time, this is Streit. We'll see you later. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.